The first thing I registered when I woke up was the sound of my husband's voice, low and careful, the way he only talks when he's trying not to wake me or trying not to cry. I kept my eyes closed for a few seconds because something in my body already knew it wasn't going to be a good morning, and I wanted a few more seconds inside not knowing. I was in a recovery room at Atrium Health, a hospital on the south side of Charlotte, North Carolina. I was 31 years old, and 36 hours earlier my appendix had ruptured. I'd been at work when it started, a sharp cramp I'd waved off as stress, and by the time my coworker drove me to urgent care, a surgeon was being paged and I was being rolled into an OR on a gurney, signing consent forms I barely remember signing. The surgery went fine. That's what the nurses kept saying, and I believed them because the alternative was too much to think about when you're lying in a hospital bed with a drain tube in your side and a morphine drip, making everything feel slightly underwater. My husband Joel had been there the whole time. He'd called out of work, slept in the recliner next to my bed, smuggled in a peanut butter granola bar because he knows hospital food doesn't sit right with me. That's the kind of man he is. The kind that actually shows up. My mother arrived the second morning with a Panera bag and a look on her face I couldn't quite read. Not worried. She'd called enough to know I was stable, something else. Distracted. She kept checking her phone, and I remember thinking she was tired, that she'd probably been up late, that it was worry coming out sideways the way it sometimes does. She left after 2 hours. She hugged me carefully around the drain tube and told me to rest. Joel waited until she was out the door. Then he sat down on the edge of my bed and I felt the mattress dip with the weight of something he wasn't saying yet. I got a notification from the bank, he said. We shared a savings account. We'd opened it together 3 years earlier, specifically for one purpose, our first house. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Noda, and the plan had always been to buy something before the market moved further out of reach. We'd been contributing automatically every payday, skipping trips we wanted to take, driving cars older than our relationship. The account had sat at $22,000 as of last week. I knew the number by heart because I checked it the way some people check the weather. It made me feel steady. The notification was a transfer alert. $22,000 moved in full to an account I didn't recognize. Processed 2 days before my surgery, 1 day before I even knew anything was wrong. I looked at Joel's face for a long moment. He wasn't angry yet. He looked like a man doing math he didn't want to finish. Who's on that account? I asked, even though I already suspected. Years ago, when Joel and I were just dating and I'd moved to a new city without much family nearby, my mother had asked to be added to my savings account. Just in case, she'd said. If something happens to you and you're unconscious and someone needs to pay a bill, you want a family member to have access. It had seemed reasonable at the time. I was 24, I trusted her completely, and the account didn't have much in it anyway. I'd never removed her when Joel and I consolidated our savings, assuming it didn't matter, assuming it would never matter. It mattered now. I called her from the hospital bed. She answered on the third ring. Callie, she said before I could speak, I can explain. I've spent a lot of time since then thinking about how differently this conversation might have gone if she'd led with something else. An apology. A question about whether I was okay. Anything other than I can explain, which is the verbal equivalent of someone already building a defense before you've even filed a complaint. What did you do with our money? I asked. My voice was flat. The morphine was doing something interesting to my emotional range, making everything feel very far away and very close at the same time. She took a breath. I heard the sound of dishes in the background, the scrape of a pan on a burner. Like she was in her kitchen doing something routine while having this conversation. Your brother's engagement party is in 6 weeks, she said. We'd already put deposits down on everything, the venue, the caterer, the photographer. And then Cynthia's parents, her family. Cynthia was my younger brother Damon's fiancée. They have very specific expectations. They're from money, Callie. And we didn't want Damon to be embarrassed in front of her family. We just needed to cover the difference. We were going to pay it back before you, and Joel needed it. I didn't say anything for a moment. You took $22,000, I said. It's not like it's gone forever. We'll pay it back. Mom, that was our down payment. That was 3 years of. I stopped. I couldn't finish that sentence in that room, with the IV still in my arm and my side aching from surgery I'd had less than 48 hours ago. That was ours. You had access to that account because I trusted you in an emergency, not because I gave you permission to spend it. She started to cry. Not the kind of crying that means someone is broken open and genuinely sorry. The kind that means the conversation has gotten harder than expected, and crying has become the emergency brake. "We were going to tell you," she said. "After you were feeling better. We didn't want you to stress while you were in the hospital." I hung up. "I want to tell you something about my family, because this wasn't the first time money had moved in one direction, without anyone naming it out loud. It was just the first time it had moved directly out of something that was mine. My brother Damon is 3 years younger than me. He's never been a bad person exactly. He's charming and funny, and he means well in the vague general way that people do when they've never had to think too hard about consequences. My parents paid for his entire college education, tuition, housing, meal plan, everything, while I graduated with $41,000 in student loans and a work-study job I'd held since sophomore year. They bought him a truck at 22 because his old car had started making a noise they didn't like. They covered his rent for 2 years after he moved to Nashville, just until he got on his feet, which became 24 months and, by my rough calculation, somewhere around $14,000. None of this was done with malice. I want to be clear about that because it matters, somehow, that the damage wasn't intentional. They just always seemed to orbit Damon differently. Like he was the one they worried about, the one who needed extra tending, and I was the one who had always been fine, who would always be fine, who didn't need them to look twice. I had learned to take up very little space. I never asked for help I couldn't justify with a spreadsheet. I showed up to every family dinner with wine and a smile, and left without mentioning the years I'd cried in parking lots over loan payments, or the winter Joel and I ate rice and beans twice a week to accelerate our savings, or the fact that I'd quietly transferred $300 a month for 36 consecutive months into that account without touching it once. The day I was discharged, Joel drove me home in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then he said, "I talked to Corinne." Corinne was my best friend from college. She worked in compliance at a regional bank, which meant she understood the interior mechanics of financial systems in a way I never had. Joel had called her 2 days earlier, quietly, while I was sleeping. "She says your mother had legal access to the funds," Joel told me, keeping his eyes on the road, "which makes it complicated. It's not theft in a clean legal sense. But she also says there are options, and she wants to talk to you when you're ready." I watched the highway median go by outside the window. What kind of options? Civil claim for the amount, documentation of the original purpose of the funds. She helped me put together a paper trail, the automatic transfers, the deposit records, our mortgage pre-approval timeline. He said it the way he says most things, simply, without drama. If we need to use it, we have it. He reached over and covered my hand with his for a second without looking away from the road. My mother called 3 times that week. I let it go to voicemail. My father called once and left a message that was simultaneously an apology, and not one, something about how families make sacrifices for each other, and he hoped I understood the pressure they'd been under with Cynthia's family. The pressure they'd been under. I had been under anesthesia on a table while a surgeon removed an organ that was trying to kill me. But sure, let's discuss their pressure. Corinne came over on a Thursday evening and sat at our kitchen table with her coffee and a legal pad. She was thorough and direct, and she didn't flinch once, not at the transfer amount, not at the engagement party story, not when my voice cracked explaining that we had been 6 months away from a full 20% down payment, which meant 6 months away from avoiding PMI on a mortgage, which added up to real money across 30 years. "You have standing to pursue this civilly," she said. "You also have the option to document the transfer as exceeding the original scope of your mother's access, emergency authorization, not co-ownership, and request formal restitution in writing. It won't resolve overnight, but you'd have a clean record." I didn't want to sue my parents. I want to be honest about that. Even sitting there with the bank statement in front of me, I didn't want to sit across a courtroom from my mother. What I wanted was simpler and harder than a lawsuit. I wanted them to see it, to actually understand what they'd taken, not just the number, but the years behind it, and the assumption they'd made without even discussing it with me, that I would absorb this, that I would be fine. That being the capable one meant being the one no one had to consider. Joel's idea was quieter than mine would have been. 2 weeks after I was discharged, my parents invited the family to their house for Sunday dinner. Damon and Cynthia would be there. My mother's older sister, my Aunt Paulette, would also be there, a woman who had never once in her life successfully kept a secret, even when she meant to. Joel put together a one-page document. Nothing theatrical, just a printout. The transfer date, the amount, the opening balance and the balance it now sat at. A timeline of our auto contributions going back 36 months. Our mortgage pre-approval letter with the projected closing window we'd been working toward. He printed 3 copies, folded them into a plain white envelope, and put it in his jacket pocket without saying another word about it. My mother's table was full when we sat down. Cynthia's laugh carried across the room. Damon was telling a story about the band they'd booked for the party. The lead singer was someone he'd gone to college with who'd gotten locally known in the Nashville circuit. My mother moved in and out of the kitchen, proud and in her element, the way she gets when she's hosting something she's put real thought into. My father said grace. Someone passed the bread. The green beans went around. Then, without standing up or raising his voice, Joel passed the envelope to my father. I just need you to take a look at this, Joel said quietly, like it was a form that needed a signature. My father opened it. He read the first half page with the expression of a man who already knows the verdict before the foreman speaks. The color left his face in a way that I would have felt worse about on any other night. My mother noticed and leaned over. She read 3 lines and set her fork down. Damon looked up from his story. My Aunt Paulette craned her neck and read the page header upside down before anyone could redirect her. Is that a bank statement? She said, too loudly, because that is simply how Paulette says everything. $22,000? The table went quiet in the specific way that family dinners do when something real has broken the surface, when everyone can feel that whatever was being carefully not said has just been said. Cynthia glanced at Damon. Damon looked at my parents. My parents looked at each other like 2 people who have realized the thing they thought was contained is now in the room with everyone. What is this? My father asked, keeping his voice low. It's our savings account, I said. The one you emptied while I was in surgery. He tried to refold the paper. My aunt had already seen the number. Cynthia had seen it. The people at the edges of the table who were pretending not to listen were listening. My mother excused herself to the kitchen. I heard something set down harder than necessary on the counter. My father looked at me, then at Joel, then back at me. We were going to pay it back, Callie. We are going to pay it back. I know, I said. That's why I'm sitting at this table instead of filing a civil claim. But I need you to understand something, and I need everyone here to hear it, because I am very tired of things being handled in corners. I kept my voice even. I wasn't shaking the way I'd expected to. This money was mine and Joel's. We saved it for 3 years. We skipped things. We worked overtime. We drove cars we should have replaced 2 years ago. And you withdrew it, without asking either of us, while I was unconscious, to fund a party for someone else. And then you called it a family sacrifice. That isn't a sacrifice. A sacrifice is something you agree to. Damon was quiet for a long time. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular when he finally said, I knew some of it came from you. Mom told me you'd offered to help. I should have asked more questions. I should have called you myself. He paused. I'm going to talk to Cynthia tonight about the venue. We can transfer to a smaller room. The deposit's probably transferable. It should have never been this large anyway. It wasn't the speech of someone who'd spent years paying attention. But it was the most honest thing I'd heard from him in longer than I could remember. And I appreciated it more than I let show. My mother came back from the kitchen with red-rimmed eyes, and her jaw set in the way that means she's going to hold herself together by force of will. She sat down and looked at her plate before she looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. I made the wrong call. I should have called you from that hospital waiting room before I did anything. That was wrong. It wasn't a complete apology. There was still armor in it, still the slightly stiff posture of someone giving ground they hadn't expected to give. But it was real enough, and I took it for what it was, a beginning, not an ending. The weeks after that weren't a clean resolution. Real accountability in a family never is. My father came to our apartment the following Saturday, alone, without my mother, and sat at our kitchen table with a personal check and a look on his face of a man doing the right thing in the way that costs him something. He paid it back in 3 installments over 10 weeks, the full amount, without my asking again. It didn't undo the withdrawal, but it was something, and he did it without making me fight for it. My mother took longer. Her apology had layers she kept working through in our phone calls. A little defensiveness here, a small revision there, a moment of genuine clarity breaking through unexpectedly. About 6 weeks after the dinner, she asked me something I hadn't expected. Did you always feel like we didn't? Like we weren't equal with you? I told her the truth. She was quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, I thought you didn't need us the way he did. I thought that was something to be proud of in you. I told her that being capable isn't the same as being someone no one needs to think about. She said she was going to sit with that for a while. I think she meant it. Joel and I removed my mother from our account and opened a new one with only our names. 14 months after the surgery, we closed on a 3-bedroom house 12 minutes from where I grew up. A yard that gets afternoon sun in the back. A kitchen bigger than anything I'd let myself picture during the years of rice and beans and automatic transfers. I think about that sometimes. The years it took. The way I moved through my family believing that being low maintenance was a kind of virtue. That needing less meant I was doing something right, and I think about the moment at that dinner table when I stopped. Not loudly, not bitterly, just clearly, in front of the people who needed to hear it, and how much lighter everything has felt since. If you have ever been the one in your family who was always going to be fine, who landed on her feet, who no one thought to call first, I hope you know that capable is not the same as unbreakable, and fine is not the same as having forfeited the right to be protected. Thank you for staying with me through this. I'd really love to know what you would have done in my place. Tell me in the comments, and I'll see you in the next story.